I guess welcome to the Wrangler Backstage, Noeline Hoffman.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for making this work. It's cold this time of year where we're from, so it's nice to sit somewhere nice and warm and familiar and have a little chit chat.
No kidding. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So, for those who may not know who you are, where you're from, maybe start by giving us just a little background of maybe where you're from and kind of how you made your way into this country and western music scene.
Yeah, my name is Noeline Hoffman. I grew up in Bow Island, Alberta, and down in the Badlands of Southern Alberta, about an hour from the Montana border. And yeah, I always grew up playing music and loving music and around lots of good country music.
So you grew up in Southern Alberta. Who were some of the early influences you had? Like obviously, a lot of us like late '90s, mid '90s kids. We have like a lot. Obviously, a lot of '90s country was very influential on us. But who were some of those folks that maybe kind of helped you realize that this is what you want to be part of?
I love Emmylou Harris and Gillian Welch, lots of the classic outlaw guys, Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings. Yeah, I Patsy Cline. That was one my mom was always playing. Patsy Cline. Those were some of my big influences growing up.
So who would you say you style like built your style off of? I mean, like obviously you don't really fall into that the new country or whatever like the radio country genre that we all know that a lot of people know today, but you kind of in the same vein as like Coulter Wall, Zach Top, Vincent Iverson, like those outlaw guys, like you said. How what made you decide to go down that path?
Yeah, I guess actually that you mentioned Coulter Wall. Coulter was a big sort of a gateway drug sort of for me into this modern modern country music space that I'm a part of today. I discovered him about the same time I started discovering my own all my own music, and all of a sudden my world opened up to not only others that were sort of following in the same sort of space as him, but also lots of classic songwriters like Townes Van Zandt and John Prine. All of a sudden, it was music that was the kind of music I wanted to write.
So what were the early days like? Were you playing guitar and writing songs right away, or like how'd you again find your way into this vein that you're in now?
Yeah, I took piano lessons all growing up, and then eventually I was always into creative writing as a kid, and eventually picked up the guitar at about 12 or 13, and that sort of translated into writing songs. And so every once in a while, I'd go to an open mic or play a little gig here and there. But songwriting was always my number one love.
So did you have a moment where maybe you thought that this is something that you could pursue and could be successful at, or was it always just you always had that mindset of like, "Hey, I'm gonna do this and nothing's gonna stop me"?
I always had big dreams of being of doing this. And it's funny that yeah, so I was actually sent a photo this weekend. It's a picture of me when I was about 10 at a camp out. There was my dad or
Yeah.
my best friend's dad's work camp out, and I was up there singing Bad Moon Rising. I didn't know that there was a photo of it, but I remember that really stands out to me as a first time that I thought, that it felt real. I think I always had, big dreams or big imagination as a kid, and that was a time that I was really it's all downhill from there.
Yeah, once it's kind of like rodeo. Like once you get a little taste of it, or like
Yeah,
have an idea, like oh, I can do this or pursue it. It's like very, very addictive. Like I've
yeah,
been down that road before with it
definitely.
too. So you get to that point. So how do you start building out the steps to where you are now? Obviously, it's a long journey. It's never easy for anybody, and everybody's music journey is different. But you've found some really big success in the past year. You have some great music. You have great music. But how have you built up to this point?
Yeah, so
Hard hitting question.
yeah, big loaded question. So I've been working at music and working on my writing and playing music, trying to improve, all my life. And then when I graduated school, it was still COVID, so I ended up going to work for a couple years, and there was nowhere, by the time I had my driver's license, because of that there was nowhere to play. So by the time I could take myself to try and, you know, play and gig and everything like that, I wasn't able to. So I sort of more or less put down my guitar, wasn't performing for a couple years, and I took a ranch job eventually out in Manitoba. And when I left that job and moved back to Alberta, I was a bit of a lost ship, and but I always wanted to do this, but I sort of was really scared to. I was scared to do it because there's no roadmap. There's no step by step. It felt like I could imagine if I pursued any other career path. I felt like I could see the
Yeah.
step 1, 2, 3. But for music, that I couldn't I couldn't see that. It felt like leaping off a cliff. But anyway, my parents are awesome, and they said, okay, if this is really what you want to do, give it 3 months,
Yeah.
and just give it all you got. Put all your cards on the table and just let's just
Wow.
see what happens. And so I did. I started driving around the province to playing all sorts of open mics and going to shows all over to meet people that I'd followed for a long time on the regional scene. And so I started sort of building community and playing anywhere they'd let me on stage. Actually, one of my first cold call emails that ever got answered was Ranchman's
Oh, nice.
here. I got to play their local
Yeah,
vocals,
awesome.
and that was such a big deal to me because Ranchman's was always in
If
my
you,
mind
yeah,
this
all the time.
iconic bar to play. So I felt like that was really exciting when I got to play Ranchman's for the first time. But yeah, I just started just anywhere they let me on stage, I would play.
So kind of going back to where your ranch job, like you kind of went
Yeah.
away from the music in a sense, and then found your way back. So that couldn't have been easy to get going. Like how, like what
Yeah.
like obviously you said you kind of just hit the road, but what were some of the challenges like when you were like starting out again, basically?
Yeah, I guess I mean nobody even except for super local, around my own hometown or maybe the neighboring city, I didn't have relationships with any of the regional musicians that were doing it full time or playing music. So I guess the biggest challenge was just putting the fear aside and shaking hands and introducing myself and going places alone and just being so you have to be laser focused because
Yeah,
nobody else will see, especially in that stage when you
you have to
don't have
prove
a job
yourself to.
and you're laser focused on playing music for a living. Everybody thinks you're crazy, so you just have to be so convinced
Yeah, that's all it
that
takes. That self belief is all you need really
yeah,
to keep going. And I mean, for anybody, the networking side of things is never fun. It's always hard, but and especially going into it by yourself, not really knowing anybody, that had to be a challenge. Like, was that something you were naturally always good at, or do you have to develop over the time that you were kind of growing? Like, it's such a
man.
thing.
I don't know if I would say I'm naturally good at it. I love to talk to people. I love
Yeah.
people. Eventually, it gets easier. People. I was so lucky. The people that I did meet, and by doing that, I've become wonderful friends. And I think that, you know, you have good experiences and your confidence builds. And I've been so lucky. Especially Calgary was a big part of my regional experience in music. So big part of my foundation here.
So who were some of those first people you met along the way? I know, obviously, the more people you meet, you open the door, and it seems like this side of country music, and it's the same kind of everywhere. Like I was kind of talking off camera how nice everybody is and thankful for time, but who like the community seems very close knit, all you guys, right?
Yeah.
So who are some of those people who kind of helped kickstart it, where we are now?
Yeah, it's funny. One of the people I met early on is now my guitar player in my Canadian band. His name's Tyler Allen, and we actually met. He's got a band in Calgary called the Red Hot Hayseeds, and they did during the Stampede. They do like a Stampede, a special edition show, and they had invited me to be their special guest. So we basically shook hands and then played the show together on stage, and then we actually played Ranchman's again on the patio. They didn't let us inside. They've
Yeah.
yeah,
Getting closer and
but
closer. We're making our way in
one day
here.
I'll play the stage here,
Yeah.
but played the patio, and they have become just, my best friend. We've had such so much fun on the road, and yeah, ever since then we were at first just gigging. I was always hiring them, gigging around Calgary, and yeah.
Did you at the beginning were you playing a lot of original music or were you doing lots of covers? Like kind of what was your mix? I know I feel like
Yeah,
starting out it's something you have to like work into making your
totally.
own show, right?
Totally. Yeah, I always tried to do a good balance to hold people's attention, but I would say I probably played a 50-50 mix when I was doing bar shows. But
What were some of
yeah.
like what was some of like your favorite covers or some of the early songs of yours that you were playing that
Ooh.
still keep
You
in rotation
know,
today?
keeping yeah, Waymore's Blues,
That's a banger.
Big River, Mercury Blues, Bluebird Wine, feeling like all sorts of good
beer drinking, honky
beer
tonking.
drinking, honky tonk songs. Yeah, come on.
So moving through the development, when did you start to see kind of the light, not the light in the tunnel, kind of where I'm going, like kind of the what could be or what like the next thing in your music career? What was that moment? Do you remember kind of how that shook out?
You know, before I started pursuing music, I felt for a lot of my life that when my friends went off to school and I stayed working, and I felt like I was seeing everybody, thriving, and was like, man, when will my people come around, or when will be my turn? But it was because I wasn't being true to I was looking in some of the wrong places, and as soon as I started to follow my true dream, my world opened up, and yeah, I felt every time, like early on when I got to play local vocals at ranches, that was like an encouragement. It felt like every time I wrote down a whole list before I started pursuing it, and from small goals like that to playing under the Big Sky Festival,
Yeah, that's
for
cool.
instance, and it just I kept my foot on the pedal, and things, there was always a win, to keep me
Those small wins are
knowing that I was on
huge.
the right track. It's always small wins really
Yeah.
were big.
Especially in this line of work where it's like you can get down on yourself and find yourself in a bad place like pretty quickly, I
Yeah,
feel like. And yeah, if you don't have those small wins or those goals to work towards, like it could be a desolate place
yeah,
if you're not careful.
totally.
Obviously, working in this industry, you need a team and good people around you. So how has that process been for you, building out a team and getting the right people around you to have success?
Yeah. I've been so fortunate on that front. I think a keystone piece in my team building has been my agent, Jacob. I actually met him in 2023. I
Hmm.
had been, grinding out, trying to build a foundation in Calgary for, I don't know, about 8 months or a year.
Hmm.
And I was feeling good. I was playing every weekend. I'd kind of accomplished mostly what I had set out to do in the first place, as far as like becoming a part of the regional music
Hmm.
community. And so then I was like, okay, what's the next step? And the next step was to go down to the States and
Hmm.
start doing the same thing down there. So I drove down to Kentucky and Tennessee sort of on a whim, and I ended up extending my trip. I wasn't even supposed to be at this festival, but I ended up staying for another a festival there, and was jamming with with an artist backstage, and turned around, and there was Jacob behind me. And so I met him before that my career started to
Hmm.
catch any steam in the States, which was really cool. And so Jacob and I kept in touch, and then as when the purple gas moment happened and everything, um, then he jumped on board and
Hmm.
then helped me by my management. And yeah, I mean, there's so many
There's so
just
many
lots of
elements of it.
pieces,
It's
lots
crazy.
of elements. So
Yeah. Dang.
yeah.
So okay, so I want to get to the purple gas moment. But leading up to that, like you said, you kind of had to break through from the Canadian regional, getting into the U.S. What was that process like? Was it a whole new challenge for you? Was it kind of, did you find it went smoother maybe than the beginning, or what was that kind of between from the time you were like, okay, I'm going to America, and now and then purple gas? Like, what was that time frame like for you?
Yeah, so that trip to America was totally life changing. I went down. I didn't have hardly any plan. It was super, pretty much no notice. I had three plans. It was to go to visit Railbird Festival,
Hmm.
visit Nashville, and then play. There was this little contest for a small festival down there. And anyways, then the rest was all fill in the blanks.
You're filling in the
Sorry.
gaps. You went to these festivals. You're filling in the gaps. Um, what was so? Did you like just come up with the plan as you were going, or did things kind of fall into your lap, or what was that process?
Yeah,
It's got to be
I
scary, like
guess
just going into
it
it blindly,
was.
right?
It was scary. I think it was probably more scary for my parents than it was than it was for me.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think the same thing. It was just the same thing that I did here. I sort of just followed the coincidences, followed the
Hmm.
small wins, and sort of the magic, and it that's been the key to all of it for me.
Hmm.
It's just
Just keep moving,
Well, yeah,
keep it happening.
keep moving.
So so heading down there, did you have like a whole bunch of songs like loaded up, ready to go? Like a lot of the ones that are out now, were they all part of that kind of wheelhouse or Rolodex of songs you had going down
Yeah.
there? How did that work?
I'm trying to think. Actually, most of the songs weren't written.
Oh,
Most of those songs on the EP weren't written yet. One of them I wrote down there. But yeah, most of the songs on the EP were written at that, or were not written at that
dang.
point.
So like
Yeah.
part of a lot of the experiences or maybe like the memories that were happening while you were like
Yeah.
doing that kind of pulled into it.
Yeah.
Cool. So okay, so then you get into let's get to Purple Gas. Obviously, for those who don't maybe not know who you are from your music, you did a collaboration with Zach Bryan of one of your original songs, Purple Gas, on his album
Great
Great
American
American
Bar
Bar Scene.
Scene.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Okay. So what was that like? Obviously, like Zach is a huge star in the all over the world now. He's got great music and must have been pretty cool for him to reach out to you. Or like, I guess before we get
Yeah.
into that part, how did like, what happened? Like, did he reach out to you, or did he hear you somewhere, or what was that? What was the thing for
Yeah.
him to reach out to you?
He had come across a video of the song online, and then, um, long story short, then he reached out and.
Hmm.
Well, actually, no. I reached out to thank him because he reposted it
Oh,
on his
okay.
story, and I sort of didn't expect, that he'd see it or anything like that. But then afterwards, then he reached out and said we should record this in his video series is the Belting Bronco.
Yes, very
So
cool.
yeah, so he reached out about that, and yeah, it was just it just continued to snowball, and he's been a huge just such a huge part of my life the last
Hmm.
couple year, I guess, and yeah, it was an unreal experience. Yeah.
It's funny because like not funny I should say, but it's interesting because like Purple Gas is a very Canadian
Yeah.
centric Canadian prairie thing that if you don't know about it, you don't know. So what was it?
Yeah.
Did you have to like explain some of the meanings of the song to him, or did he kind of know, or what was that? I'm always curious about that part of
Yeah.
it.
I think he put the pieces together. I think, lots of
Yeah.
people, yeah, I think he Googled it. We've definitely have talked about it before, but I think what resonates for him, I don't want to speak for him, but
Yeah.
I think it's the Flatland Boy
Yeah.
portion.
I think that the sentiment of the song is really cool because it just kind of speaks to the just the word is a word I'm looking for, the guile maybe of the prairie person and the farmers and
Yeah.
agriculture, and just kind of it really speaks to those people and like the struggles and what they go through to like put food on our table, I guess you could
Yeah.
say, right?
Yeah.
So I can see how that would like relate to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So what was the recording process like? Did you go down there to record for the album, or did you guys have to do it in separate places, or what was that? I know that happens sometimes in
Yeah.
music. So
So we did it in Nashville, a little studio in Nashville, and we just set up two mics, not so dissimilar to this setup, and yeah, we just sang it down probably five, no more than five, just a few times. I can't
mhm.
remember what take that they off the top of my head what take they took, but it was just live in the room.
How nervous were you the first time you guys laid it down?
You know, yeah, it's funny. I've Zach and I have talked about this too, but I'm a perfectionist,
Hmm.
and he's not. So it was good practice for me to just to let go and
Hmm.
let it be what it is. And
One thing I admire so much about Coulter Wall is I was talking with him after his show at Billy Bob's a few years ago, and
yeah,
he said like how nervous he gets to do a show, and I'm like, man, like I can't believe like you never could
yeah,
never tell him on stage. So I'm just
yeah,
curious if it's kind of similar for you or.
yeah. I was definitely nervous at that point. We had met. It wasn't this big. It was super chill.
Hmm.
We were just
Hmm.
in a super laid back space. The whole thing was super laid back. I was definitely just because of the pressure I was putting on myself
Yeah,
of thinking of, the scale of it. That was the part that was hardest, I guess, to just try and comprehend.
I gotcha.
But yeah, I was definitely nervous, but it was honestly we had a blast. It was such a fun day. We did a little bit of work and then we just yeah,
That's good.
had a blast.
That's a
So
fun way to do it. I mean
yeah.
that's a good way to keep the scenario light and keep the
Yeah,
vibes in the room
and that's
good.
that's that's what makes the best.
Yeah.
Like that's what makes the best music, and that's how music should be. And it should be fun, and it should be raw and honest.
Yeah.
And
I think that
And
well, people
yeah,
nowadays, like especially in the social media world and the digital world, like they search for authenticity and
yeah,
people being genuine. And I think that's why you see the success of people like you and Coulter and all these folks coming through. Uh, they're genuine in who they are. They're not trying to be somebody they're not,
yeah,
and their music speaks to that. And I think for even for me as a music fan, like that speaks to me like huge, and people want to be part of that. And I think that's why maybe
yeah,
that made that scenario maybe not quite as nerve wracking for for somebody, right? Like
yeah.
was that moment kind of your first pinch me moment, or like the first moment where you're like, hey, I'm actually making it in this deal, or what was kind of like so you lay down the track, you guys celebrated, it's going on the album. What was the kind of your feelings afterwards before the release?
For the release, man, I think even after we recorded it, it wasn't real in my mind. In my mind, I was still like, man, there's a, you know, maybe it won't come. It wasn't even thinking. I wasn't thinking negatively or anything.
Hmm.
But I think it just simply wasn't hadn't set in
Yeah, yeah, I gotcha.
that it was really happening. But as far as pinch me moments go, I think my whole, from the very start to now, I've had pinch me moments the whole time. It's just they've grown the scale to, like an onlooker has grown.
Yeah.
I feel like I have pinch me moments every day, and that's just because I like to focus on the small,
Yeah,
the
and you're
small
doing what you
wins,
love,
and
right? Like
yeah,
it's cool to see those things fall
yeah,
into place, and obviously you work hard at what you do. So having that stuff come to fruition,
yeah,
it's almost it's because like you don't want to like not trying to be like say like be conceited or cocky. It's like
hmm,
it's almost not surprising for stuff like that to happen. Because if you're a good person, you work hard, and you're genuine who you are, like good things happen to good people.
hmm,
I like to think so. It can't be like
yeah,
obviously it's surprising, but also it can't be like a huge surprise. 'Cause it's like I've been working for this. I'm putting the work in to make this happen. That's why I always look
yeah.
at it. Yeah.
It's definitely a pinch me moment. Getting to record and with Zach and be on that album. What a I would never have thought in a million years.
So
So
what happened to your career after that song came out? Like, did you did things like kind of explode for you, or did it take kind of a little bit of a slower burn for people to kind of figure out that you're the one behind Purple Gas, or what was kind of that the first few months after that the song came out for you?
yeah, it was the first song that had ever been on Spotify. It was my first ever. I didn't even have a
Oh,
Spotify
really?
profile set up at that
That's cool.
at that point. So that was one of our stipulations. Was like, okay, you know, we got to set this up because he called me on a Tuesday or night,
Hmm.
maybe Wednesday night, if we could release it as a single on the Friday. And so we were like, okay, but you guys got to set up my Spotify profile.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, definitely. Ever since then, I mean, we had touring booked already in January, but no doubt,
Hmm.
man, that it's opened up just so many doors for me and
What a song to have as your
opportunities.
first Spotify. I didn't realize that. That's really cool. I'm sorry, I have it pulled up here now, and it's
Yeah,
like 45 million streams on Spotify. That's got to be a kind of a cool thing to think about. That's wild.
yeah,
So, okay, so then, like you said, it opens up so many doors, and you had some touring booked. Let's get into 2024. Like, obviously, a huge year for you. Toured with Charlie Crockett, played all these big shows, played in Vegas, the NFR. So
hmm,
it's such a cool year. So, like, what were some of the highlights of the year, and kind of how this whole train has kept on going? You released your EP, Purple Gas. So many cool things. There's so many cool things to list that happened that year. But let's start like
yeah,
kind of how the year kicked off for you and where we're at now.
yeah. The year kicked off. The touring year kicked off with Charlie Crockett. Um, Over the spring and the summer, we did about 15 dates, which was amazing. That was my first tour ever, so that was a pinch me. That was a pinch me moment. Yeah, I loved touring with them.
Hmm.
They're the real deal. They're one of my favorite bands in
Oh,
the
they're so
in the
good.
biz.
Yeah.
So that was awesome. And then yeah, the whole summer, we were on the road for
Hmm.
I was on the road for most of it, and opportunities continued to roll in, and then my biggest highlight was playing the Grand Ole Opry.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Um,
Dang, what
yeah,
was that like?
2024 was jam packed.
What was your how are you feeling going into that? Like
Oh,
because you have to get a call to play, or I don't know how it works with the Opry's thing. But anyways, how did it come to fruition that you ended up playing the Opry?
it was sort of, I don't have actually a spectacular like a story like
Oh,
that about it, but
okay, I gotcha.
um, But yeah, it just worked out. I was in town for Americana Fest,
Okay.
so it just worked out
But I
for
mean,
that
right
day.
place at the right time. That's all that
Yeah,
matters,
totally.
right? Hey, that's cool.
Totally.
So back to Charlie Crockett. He's becoming a huge star now.
Hmm.
Well, everybody's fans of his music. He does really cool stuff. His on stage presence, I love. Like the vibe he
Yeah.
brings. It's really cool. So how did you connect with him, and how did like, obviously that would have been a really cool phone call to get too. Another pinch me moment of like, hey,
Yeah, it just started off with the offer to do 7 Canadian dates,
hmm
and then we eventually got an offer for a few more American dates.
hmm
But at that point, I didn't have an American band, and my Canadian players also didn't have visas,
oh, okay.
so I actually switched bands. I went across Canada with one band, took the Greyhound bus to do across the border to do one solo or two solo shows, then had about a week or so off, and then met up, quickly rehearsed an American band that my producer and friends helped put together, and then we went out on the road for the American dates.
So touring with him through Canada, obviously this is probably like some of your biggest shows in the cities you
Yeah.
got to play. We saw you play in Calgary. How cool was it to just going back to what we started talked about at the beginning, like for where you started to where you get to that point? Like how cool was that to be playing these bigger venues in your home province?
Yeah, it was definitely, I couldn't think of a better way to have started touring.
hmm Yeah, for your first tour,
Yeah,
nonetheless, that's a cool way
yeah.
to kick it
So
off.
there was something special definitely about being at home. People were really excited, I think, to that I was Canadian and
hmm
everything. So I think that energy was so encouraging, and
hmm
definitely I'll never forget stepping on stage in Vancouver for the first night of that tour and just being like, "This is
We're doing
we're
it.
doing it." Like,
Yeah,
there's no
no going
yeah,
back now.
hold on,
You're
and yeah, it's been been riding it out ever since. So
What was it? What's it like? What was it like touring with Charlie? I know like I mentioned, his stage presence is like
yeah,
because like I mean, with country music, like obviously like there's the slower paced music and like it's like you kind of have to bring up the pace of a lot of things in a live show to keep the crowd engaged. I think depending on the
yeah,
scenario, but he does such a great job with that. Is where I was going with it, and I feel like
yeah,
you kind of fed off of that energy too because your stage presence in Calgary was so great. But I was like fascinated by it. Even like Zach does a good job of it. Like some of
yeah.
his slower songs, he brings them up for a show. But how much did you learn from Charlie just from those however many dates you played with him?
I learned a lot from Charlie, and yeah, gosh, I just took it really seriously. I think when opening, I've looked up to Charlie and loved his music for so long, and then seeing that show every night, and the production, everything, they pull out all the stops
hmm
and really throw it down. So I think it made me better
hmm
because I wanted to bring I wanted to bring everything I had to feel like I belonged on
hmm
that stage.
hmm That's
So
a good point because
yeah,
I always wonder with music and people touring and like you think of a guy like Zach, how many shows he's played in the past 2 years and how many
yeah,
times he's played
gosh,
a lot of the same songs.
yeah,
Like it's got to get like no matter how much you love what you do and love being there and want to be doing that, it's got to wear on you a little bit. So
for sure.
how do you battle that for yourself?
Yeah, I guess I'm still still sort of figuring that out.
hmm
I just try and take it one day at a time. Try and we've been talking about this whole time, just appreciate the little things
hmm
and find the small pleasures, and also I just try to stay as present as possible, and the fact that I look around and I get to live my dream, and
hmm
that's nothing that I ever take. I feel like I'm just so lucky, and I'll
hmm
never that none of it is lost on me.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the right attitude to have because there's probably 20 people lined up behind you
Yeah.
who would shoot you in in the
Yeah.
leg to
It's
take the
yeah.
job and I mean having that perspective like it's so huge and I think that's in any career anything you do I think it's just realizing how fortunate you are to be in the
Yeah.
position you are and have the ability to keep on going like that's enough to keep somebody motivated at the very least.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you released an EP in 2024, Purple Gas. Like that's the title, right? Okay,
Yes.
cool. I want to
Yeah.
make sure I had that right.
Yeah.
So what was that like? What was that process like? Writing your first album, all your own music? How cool is that?
It was awesome. I was on the road a lot, so we sort of were recording on and off. Anytime I'd get a couple days or off, we'd lay some more down, do some more songs. So as at first we were only planning to do two singles, and then when the single came into the picture, then we decided to. It sort of continued to grow until eventually we recorded six songs. But yeah, definitely it was a moving target throughout the summer. But I'm so glad to finally have you know
A
have
little more, few more songs on
a
the
solid
Spotify
package
list.
out there, and even more excited to have the opportunity to record an album the good old fashioned way next, and really set some a good chunk of time aside, and give it room to breathe, and not be going back and forth
Yeah,
as often.
I guess like having that kind of consistency, not like having to record a few here,
Yeah.
there, like it probably makes
Right.
a big difference. What's your songwriting process like? I'm always curious about that when I talk to artists. Like, what do you come up with like a chorus first or like a melody? My music terminology is not that great, but how does your process work when you're crafting a song, a Purple Gas
Yeah,
or Rodeo
gosh.
Junkies or something?
Yeah, I guess it depends. Sometimes I feel like I can't take credit for it. Sometimes I feel like the songs sort of they just strike down. There's like a lightning bolt. But I don't know. Sometimes I've always been a lyrics first. I'm a words person. So
Right.
lots of times I'll get a phrase or something stuck in my head and then just build on it. It feels like songwriting to me often feels like it's like solving a puzzle.
Right.
Like it's like all already. It feels like it all exists already, and I just have to
Put it together.
like dig it,
Huh. Never thought of it
kind
that
of
way.
archaeology.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Like you're hanging out at the Royal Tuttle Museum digging up
Yeah.
some dinosaur bones.
Thinking of bones.
Okay, so this is a question I've always wondered with music. So you're writing a song, you're a words first person, you say, and the lyrics come to you first. How do you decide what to play? Like, how do you decide to like I'm gonna do like that's I don't know if it's like a very vague question or it's a loaded question or it's an
Yeah.
easy question or a dumb question, but I've always just wondered like how do you decide to play that certain riff with Purple Gas or how do you like I've
Yeah.
always that blows my mind.
Well, Purple Gas was I wanted to write a song about purple gas, and I had also I'm not the kind of man to blame the dealer on a losing hand, and I'd been wanting to write this song forever and finally sat down like I'm gonna write it. And I was sort of just noodling around on the guitar. I was actually playing the Towns Van Zandt Rex's Blues, and I was just doing that, and then Purple Gas sort of can't, I don't know. It depends every time. It depends
That's
who you're writing.
crazy.
If I'm trying to write like a honky tonk song,
Certain
I'll
sounds and elements you
try
want to
and
have in.
yeah.
Okay,
But
that makes sense.
sometimes I don't know. Some lyrics and melody comes together. Sometimes it just
Noodling on the
depends.
guitar, I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Because I guess probably just
definitely
messing around and
noodling.
thinking,
Yeah,
and then just like, yeah, I was
yeah,
just fascinated by that. Anyways, cool.
yeah.
So okay, so you have your EP, Purple Gas. Obviously, Purple Gas is a very popular song, but what do you have maybe a favorite or one that has a special place in your heart from that EP?
Um, I think the sleeper is the way you bring me to tears.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a waltz. It's a love song. It's my only just pure love song. The other ones are tainted by heartbreak or something like that. But yeah, I think that's one of my favorites.
so you're working on a new album, but you've got to do some cool collaborations, like obviously Purple Gas with Zach Bryan. Do you maybe have a dream collab you'd want to have on maybe your upcoming album or something you're working on?
Ooh,
Maybe some little juicy tidbit you can give us or something?
ooh, I don't have a juicy tidbit, but I do have dreams. I would dream that Emmylou Harris would be on
Oh,
my upcoming album.
well, maybe she'll see this and
Emmylou,
come on, help a girl out.
yeah, yeah, or Winona Judd,
Hmm. Did you get to bump into
Gillian
her at the
Welch.
NFR?
Not at NFR,
Oh,
but
okay.
we recorded the EP at their property.
Oh, cool. Okay,
Yeah,
nice,
yeah.
nice.
So that was awesome.
Okay, sorry, keep going with your collabs. I interrupted you there.
Yeah. Gillian Welch.
Hmm.
Gosh. Turnpike. I'd love
Oh,
to write with
those guys
with
those
Evan.
guys are
Yeah.
the best. I love those
Yeah.
guys. Speaking of Turnpike, I'm gonna bounce around all over the place. That's what this way my brain works. A little bit of
Yeah.
ADHD flying around. But anyways, you just announced Red Rocks with Turnpike Troubadours. How cool is that? That's gonna be
Oh,
a amazing show.
it's my I couldn't dream up a better lineup.
Are they reaching out to you, or is it there like people reaching out to you, or how does that process work when you're supporting these bigger bands?
Yeah, it's a tangled web of people and connections. Turnpike and I share. We have one of the same managers. So we have a connection there, and yeah, it's just the offers come in. The promoters and the agents all talk, and you know, it's it's different, I guess, for
Every show.
every show. Yeah,
Because then you're doing the one in San Fran with Zach, Turnpike,
yeah,
and Kings of Leon as well, right? That's gonna
yeah,
be a huge show.
yeah, yeah. It's gonna be wild. Yeah,
Cool. And then, so I guess now going back to 2024, Zach did his tour, the Quit Time tour, and he brought you as support for a few of the shows. You got to play in Edmonton. So that's kind of building off of the Charlie Crockett thing where it's okay, you got to play the bigger venues with him. And then Zach brings you to Edmonton and you play at Rogers when there's 20,000 people filling the place. So
yeah.
what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was crazy. I didn't open any of those shows, but he did have me up
Sorry,
for
yeah, for
both
one song.
nights.
My bad. Yep.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, both nights in Edmonton. Yeah, that stepping up there, just the energy is crazy. But it was man, I had the time of my life. Yeah,
Did you have to like kind of bring yourself like snap back into like okay I gotta like remember the words to the song.
definitely, definitely,
Do you
definitely.
have like little tricks to do that? I'm always curious. Another thing I'm always curious of like how you can
Hmm.
remember so many songs. I need
Yeah,
I need the karaoke screen to like tell me what's coming up next, or else I
yeah.
forget it.
Yeah, this is. I should probably find a new hack, but if I need to focus, I'll close my eyes. But I gotta find a new. Just yeah, probably just focusing on one spot. And
So 2025 now we're back to this year. You mentioned Railbird earlier in this interview. You just got announced as one of the performers for Railbird. So what in your mind, like what does that mean to you to kind of go from spectating, being there, and then now you get to be up on that stage?
yeah, that is one
I saw your
heck.
post about it, which is why I bring it up. But you posted about how you
Yeah,
kind of were there and got announced,
for
and
sure.
I wanted to hear it right from you. What it?
Yeah, that is one heck of a full circle moment.
Yeah.
Also one crazily enough that I had written down as a wild crazy dream.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could not be more excited for that. It's just
It's gonna be a
yeah,
crazy year for you. It's
yeah.
wild. Every time I see like a new show announced or a tour, like your name seems to be popping up quite a bit. That's gotta be like a pretty cool way to kick off a new year and to kind of take
Yeah.
that next step in your career.
Yeah, I'm so thankful and so excited to hit the ground running in April. Yeah.
So could give us kind of a timeline for the year. You got an album coming. Sounds like you got some touring maybe happening. I don't know if I could say that. If not,
Yeah, yeah, lots
and then
of
some big shows booked. So maybe start with where people can come see you and some of the big shows you're gonna be at, and then maybe get into the rest of the stuff I mentioned.
yeah, we're gonna kick off the year with Two Step in Texas, and then we have
That'll be a
some
cool bit. That'll be a cool one.
yeah dates with 49 Winchester and some headline dates in there also with Kate Hoffman supporting, and then we do Stagecoach and Under the Big Sky, Railbird, Boots and Hearts. We're gonna be all over the place.
Cool. So then, okay, so that's kind of mapped out for you. Maybe some
Yeah.
touring, and then what's the album process gonna be like for you? I know you probably don't have any dates set in stone, but what
Yeah,
that look like?
nothing set in stone. I think we're taking a look at what that's gonna look like. But yeah, writing lots, dreaming up lots of ideas. So
Noodling, lots of noodling.
lots of noodling. So it's
Nice. We're super stoked, and it's gonna be cool to kind of follow the year and keep up with what you got going on. But anyways,
all
thanks for the
right.
time.
No,
Really
thank
appreciate
you.
it. This has been so fun,
Yes, thanks
and
for having
it's
me.
been good to get to know you a little bit better,
Yeah,
fellow
yeah,
Prairie gals. So
yeah.
yeah,
Back
good
at
fun.
you. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks for having me.